before we talk about House of the Dragon, we should first talk about Game of Thrones.
We should.
First, Season 8.
Season 8.
So, welcome back, everybody, to episode number 26. Today, we are going to be talking about a little bit of Game of Thrones, but the majority of this is going to be about House of the Dragon. We just watched episode number 1, and I think I should also mention, this is not Richie. If you're listening on audio only, we have a special guest here. This is my good friend Jordan, and he is a huge Game of Thrones fan and convinced me to watch House of the Dragon, and now we're going to be watching the whole entire season together. Maybe not every episode together, but we're going to be watching the whole season. We're giving you our reactions to episode 1 and our feelings about it, and then when the season finishes, after episode 10, we'll come back and review the whole show. But if you'll notice, Jordan has a lot more hair than Richie.
That's the key. That is the key.
That is the key. So he's already a more impressive specimen overall. Mm-hmm. But now let's get down and dirty before we talk about House of the Dragon. We should first talk about Game of Thrones.
We should.
First, Season 8.
Season
8. So, first thing about Season 8 is... now, no joke. Season 8 deeply affected me as a human. It affected my psyche. It
affected many people.
It did.
In a very deep way.
Children who are not born yet are affected by Season 8 of Game of Thrones. Honestly, though, jokes aside, Game of Thrones has been huge for... I'll let you tell this story, but it has been huge for... It's basically how we became friends, right?
Yeah.
And do you want to tell that story?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, I mean, we knew of each other sort of like peripherally from just like, knowing people, mm-hmm. other people. But I remember one time when I was at your apartment and you were living with some other people, I looked into your bedroom and just saw the banners hanging down, like from the Vale and the Baratheon and everything. I was like, oh, yeah. So you're a Game of Thrones fan?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, oh, I'm one too. And then, so we got talking and it was like, yeah, this guy knows what he's talking about. And then at one point we're like, all right, let's just nerd out and rank the seasons.
Rank them. Yep.
And we did, and they were virtually identical.
I think we swapped season 4 and 6, and that was
something like that. Yeah, and that was like our stepbrothers. Did we just become best friends moment? Yes. It was like it was a total nerd out. But
yeah,
it's worked out well.
Yeah. So it was only fitting to have you. And this, if I didn't say your name, this is Jordan, by the way.
I think you said my name.
Did I? Well, it's Jordan again.
Yeah.
But, we'll figure. But this is Jordan, and that's our. Essentially our intro to how we became big friends because we were acquaintances before. And so it was only fitting that you were on the Game of Thrones House of the Dragon podcast.
Yeah.
And so Game of Thrones, we won't batter this to death because it's been said before.
It's been very well battered by this point.
Yes. Would you like to give some 2 cents first of what Game of Thrones, a peak Game of Thrones meant to you and just how great the peak of this show is?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's such an important show just in television in general. I mean, it really did change people's perspective of what a television series could be in terms of it being cinematic. Obviously, just the budgets for TV shows have gone up so much, and a lot of that is traced to Game of Thrones. I mean, yeah, seasons 1 through 4 are just absolute masterpieces. They're just pure perfection, pretty much. And then, obviously, there was that sort of decline from season 5. Season 5, I think, is the first one where you start to see some of the problems coming out.
But you got to admit, season 6 pulls it together phenomenally.
And even season 5, I mean, like the battle, the hard home episode is really great.
Fantastic.
So even in those like first couple seasons after like they start to kind of depart from the books, although season 5 has elements of the books in them, but it's even after George R. R. Martin's getting less and less involved, which is something that we'll talk about with House of the Dragon. Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, I think season 6 has some really great moments. Season 5 has some really great moments. It's 7 and 8 that I think in hindsight people have really looked back on as the 2 that sort of stand out as where Game of Thrones really just kind of went off a cliff. And season 7's interesting because I remember when season 7 first came out, people really did not seem that unenthusiastic about it, actually. And I think a lot of that was because of the build up to season 8, and season 8 happened, and that was all very immediate. Everyone was very negative on it from the start, and then people have looked back at season 7 and said, well, a lot of the issues that I think that happened later on, you can kind of look and see popping up there. And
exactly. That's exactly
It's
the
those
case.
last 2 seasons, but
Yeah.
yeah, season 8. No, I remember this. To me, the ultimate sort of way that I look at that season, because people had different reactions. I'm sure you cried a lot,
Oh yeah,
Just-
I was.
as did many people. But I remember mine was interesting because I was somewhat indifferent to it, and I don't exactly know why, because as you said, like, I'm someone who had read the books. I had really been passionate about the show. But I remember watching that last episode, and was at a watch party, and it was about 20 minutes in. And at some point, I just kind of looked outside and noticed off in the distance through the window was like a lightning storm just off in
Yeah.
the distance. And I'm not angry. I'm not making a statement.
Yeah.
It's just I get up, walk out around the couch, through the kitchen, out onto the patio, and I just stood out there for 10 minutes and watched this lightning storm off in the distance.
This approaching storm.
Yeah, this approaching storm. And I'm just like, in this moment, this was more important to me than watching the final episode of a show that I dedicated, 6 years of my life to.
Brand the Broken was on the screen, and you decided the storm was more interesting.
But yeah, so that kind of epitomizes that.
Yeah, that epitomizes what it felt to experience season 8 in a nutshell. But now, House of the Dragon. We just watched episode 1. Brand new, came out within the past hour or two, and initial reaction online, this is just based on like IMDb reviews, very positive.
Very positive.
Super positive. Almost more positive, I'd say more positive than us, because our initial conversation about this is not bad, not excellent, right? Would you say that's generally your feeling of the premiere of House of the Dragon?
Yeah, no, I came into this with very limited expectations. I mean, I was not expecting something that was going to wow me. I was not expecting that. But I guess I was sort of surprised that it felt different than I expected. It did not feel... the pacing felt different than Game of Thrones, how that had been presented. The intro was very different, obviously. But... yeah, no, I think it was just the key for me. The key was I didn't want to hype myself up too much. I know when the trailer first came out, you seemed pretty negative, and I had to kind of talk you into like, no, it could be good.
This is very important.
Give it a chance.
You talked me into watching House of the Dragon, mainly because I was so heartbroken by season 8, and you said, listen. You essentially told me that D&D, the old creators, they're not part of this, and George R. R. Martin is very involved, right?
Yeah.
This is a book he wrote, a prequel to Game of Thrones, and could you tell us more about that? George R. R. Martin is supposedly very much involved in the House of Dragon.
Yeah, no, he really pushed HBO to make this their first sort of Game of Thrones spinoff. They had other ideas, and this was the one that he wanted to tell. I think it's a good first one, because obviously I think they're planning other spinoffs now, and they're going to do one with Jon Snow. I think this is a good starting point, because I think there's elements from the original series that are clearly present. It's a fight for the Iron Throne. That sort of central element that made that was so key to the original series is there. So there's some familiar stuff. It's you have your sort of family squabbles and everything. So yeah, no, I think he really pushed it, and I think ultimately it was the right decision. And I mean, when I've talked about how I've been able to separate this from season 8, a lot of it comes back to George R. R. Martin's involvement. He became less and less involved with Game of Thrones as it went along, especially after season 4. So for me, having this being based off of a book, first off, not just a prequel that, where HBO is having to fill in the blanks, and come up with their own stories and their own characters. Having it being based off of something that he actually wrote is important. And then beyond that, the fact that is involved very much in the show as a creator and a producer. And to me, that's important to have the author and the creator of this world very heavily involved as you try and expand and explore this world and try and bring people back into it after like a 3-year layoff. So
certainly,
I was enthusiastic for that reason. And again, I don't want to hate too much on David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, because I think they've gotten a lot of hate and they were put into a difficult position. So it's not so much like, oh, they're gone, so it's going to be good now. It's just I thought that it was important that George R. R. Martin be involved. If you're going to do a prequel, I thought that he should have some involvement at some level.
It's also important to have the book finished
Exactly.
for what you're going to talk about, right? I mean,
Exactly.
I would assume having the source material really helps.
That clearly proved that season 7 and 8 clearly proved that it's good to have source material.
Definitely did.
Yeah.
So for episode 1 of House of the Dragon, the premiere episode, what would you say your general rating would be? It's ballpark. We don't have to get super specific. Just general feeling. Where do you land on this?
Yeah, I'd say I'm at a soft 8.
Soft 8?
Which
okay.
is, I mean, an 8 is pretty enthusiastic. But yeah, no, I think I was into it. I definitely felt invested in what I was seeing. I really appreciated the effects. I think they really doubled down on that clearly.
Sweet.
And it felt very grandiose. It felt cinematic, which I really loved. The only thing I'm waiting to see on is the characters.
Yeah, we'll get into characters specifically for sure.
Yeah.
Because so you give this a soft 8
Soft 8,
overall.
yeah.
I'd say I'm a little bit more negative on it, but not negative on the show. I'm a high 6, somewhere around there. And so I agree with you. Let's talk about characters first, because if there's one negative aspect I could say about the premiere episode, it's, and I hate to compare it to Game of Thrones, but Game of Thrones season 1, like automatically I was into those characters. And this premiere was very, very much lackluster, and I'm not super behind any of the characters yet. And like I said, it's just a premiere episode, but it seems like we're kind of on the same track there. Would you say, which character specifically are you hoping to get more out of throughout the season? Is there a specific character that you were like, ooh, I need more?
Yeah. Well, it seems like Rhaenyra is the main protagonist. That was sort of and she's sort of the Daenerys of the series. I think the main thing is, like, you look at what Daenerys went through right off the bat in Game of Thrones. She's put through so much, and she's put through so many obstacles that you really can't help but just root for her and root for her to get through this. And you see her ambition and all of those problems and really difficult things that she goes through initially really helps to sort of get you on board right away.
Right.
Here, Rhaenyra doesn't have the same kind of challenges, certainly, because I mean she's not in the same position that Daenerys is in. She's her family hasn't been overthrown. She's not in exile. So her issues that she's dealing with are somewhat minor up until this point. And so it's hard to get immediately invested in her character. Obviously, Daemon Targaryen, he's a wild card, and he's going to be one of the more complicated characters, I think, as the series goes, which is good because you want complicated characters in a show like Game of Thrones.
Yeah, and couldn't agree with you more on the comparison between Daenerys and Rhaenyra.
Yeah.
In that Daenerys is so easy to root for right off the bat because of all the hardships she goes through. And they're the same archetype of character, Rhaenyra and Daenerys, going through, first episode already, Rhaenyra is named the heir to the throne. Daenerys is this exile whose brother is the heir to the throne. Eventually, she wants to become queen. But the comparisons are there, and Rhaenyra is tough to root for initially. You don't see so much showing of why we can get behind this character. She seems like a good person, but the hardships aren't there. Now, with Daemon acted very well, I thought.
Oh, God, yeah.
And he really looks like a good antagonist. He gives me a really, I'm interested. I'm definitely interested. And the king, what did you think about the king? Viserys, is it?
Viserys, yeah. I mean, his acting was amazing. I mean, the scene between him and Daemon in the throne room, I thought that was so well done.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the really cool, well, not cool, I think with him, the most sort of emotional moment of the episode by far was the birthing scene. That was tough to watch, and it really harkened back to Game of Thrones, in my opinion, with those hard decisions that characters have to make, and sort of what power means and what you're willing to sacrifice for power. And he decides, obviously, in that moment that he wants to try and save what he thinks is his son. Turns out to be his son, but at that point he doesn't know for sure. And it was a very brutal sequence. It might be something that turned some people off, but I understood why they made it so graphic, and I think it was important for it to be shown in that way. So no, I thought he was a very interesting character because you can see he's someone who is fundamentally a good person, but as a king, he's put into these roles where he has to make these very difficult decisions. and for me, that's very Game of Thrones ish. You know,
Having those moral dilemmas.
Exactly, the moral dilemmas. That's what made me fall in love with the series, and just to see that in the first episode and those very powerful moments, I thought was well done. So honestly, I think if probably he's the character I feel the most invested in, even more than Rhaenyra. Up until this point, we'll see what happens. We'll see how things change, but again, to me, it's all about the challenges that you see the characters facing. That's what's going to get me involved, and especially in a show like this. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. If you wanna live up to peak Game of Thrones, characters are everything, and that's why I give this somewhere in the high sixes so far. I don't hate it whatsoever. I'm looking for more, and I'm going to continue to watch, and I'm hoping that my expectations are obviously exceeded by the end of this. So character-wise, it was very much, the king had to make that difficult decision. You have Daemon, who seems like a really good antagonist. Rhaenyra, looking like starting with this ambition, and she seems grounded. We'll see where she goes. Any other side characters? Well, I know we had Hightower.
Hightower, yeah.
What did you think of the Hand of the King? That's Hightower, correct? Yeah. There's so many names.
There are. So. And I think the first thing I realized and I talked to you about is the days of the Jon Snows and the Robb Starks are gone. The easy names, we're now going to get some really weird, complicated Targaryen names, and the Hightowers are obviously going to play a very key role as the series progresses. And you kind of saw in that moment where he decides to have his daughter go in and comfort the king. After he's lost his wife and son, and you see where he's going with that, and it's something that's very recognizable if you know the politics of the time. That this is based off of. You can see what he's trying to do with that, and so he's a very interesting character, and it's going to be one of those things where the sacrifices that you make for power and the decisions that you make for power, and I think you're going to see that play out with him a lot.
For sure. And what did you think? So talking now generally plot, what did you think about the plot structure and where this is going to go? Obviously, they're battling over the throne. This could be called Game of Thrones essentially. It's another Game of Thrones.
It is, and that's what I talked about earlier was why I thought this was a good first spin-off series for them to do. Is I think you have a lot of the elements that made Game of Thrones what it is and made it so popular present. It's a fight for the Iron Throne. Here it's more you're following one family mostly. I mean, you have the Hightowers and you have other families kind of around it. But
we got one Stark. Remember the Stark?
He comes in. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So there's other families, but this is barely, and this is really going to be a struggle within the family versus what you had in Game of Thrones previously, where it's Lannisters and Starks and Baratheons. So I guess from that perspective, it'll be less complicated, but.
Yeah. So the names will still be complicated.
The names will remain complicated.
More so. Story less so.
Yes,
is what we're gathering. Yeah. Plot by the end of this. Now, this story's already written, just like Game of Thrones season 1 through 5, where so people knew what was going to happen. People know what's going to happen in this season as well, correct? Because you read the books.
Well, I did. I read the original. The 5 that were written for the main game of for Song of Ice and Fire. This is based off of Fire and Blood, which is a spin-off book. I actually have not read that.
Okay, but you know what happens.
I know what happens.
Got it. Yeah. But maybe they'll surprise us with specific things, and we'll take different directions.
Sure, yeah.
But general plot structure throughout this seems like it's going to be a battle over the throne, and something that I think should be mentioned here is: do you think they'll follow the same structure as Game of Thrones, and they'll have an episode 9 twist, or do you think they'll keep that structure of having an episode 9 something crazy? Ned Stark dies, Red Wedding. The season 4 there was a battle at the wall.
On the wall, yeah.
Hardhome was episode 8. They threw us for a curveball.
That was a curveball. That was the other cool thing about that. Yes. It was so unexpected.
Season 2, Blackwater, right?
Yeah.
So. Do you think they'll do that in House of the Dragon? Do you think they'll have a crazy, whoa, what just happened in episode 9?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because that's something that Game of Thrones became so known for, was their episode 9s. And so if they do, it's obvious, it's a nod to the fact that this is the world that this is based off of, that if they don't, I won't be entirely shocked, because already the way that this was shot and the editing felt very different. The way it was put together did not feel exactly the same, if that makes sense. It felt like certain things were different, but it was similar enough that you didn't feel completely separated from the world. But I would not be shocked if they decide to to not go with a very specific shocking event in episode 9. They might have a big battle sequence, which
They could
that
probably
applies.
afford now because
Of
it
course they
should
could.
be mentioned that
Yeah.
the budget for their cinematography and whatnot is 150 to 200 million dollars. They have the money for it now, which season 1 Game of Thrones when it started off did not.
Yeah.
They had 5 to 6 million per episode. This has a lot of money, and you could tell from the episode we saw. Like, what do you think about the look, the experience, the dragons? How did you think all this?
I really liked it. I liked, first off, the dragon designs were actually slightly different than the ones from the original series. If you look at them which I liked. I thought that was a really cool decision to not have all the dragons look exactly the same. No, I liked the whole look of it. I mean, it was very dark. If that literally, I mean that very literal. A lot of the sequences were actually just shot in very low light, so I could tell that they were going for a look. That one shot though, at the opening of the dragon flying in over King's Landing, you know what I'm talking about?
The clouds there, and
They were really showing off. They were like, "This is what we
look
can
how
do."
much money we have.
Exactly. Look. So I liked that it had more of a cinematic feel. Again, as Game of Thrones progressed, I mean, you watch the first season of Game of Thrones, and it's great in so many ways. It's probably the best written season of all of them. But the world building is not necessarily all there. And as the show progressed more and more, it sort of developed its look. With this, you could tell they have it down. They know exactly what the world looks like. It's one that I think is very familiar if you've read the books. I think they've done a very good job. Again, I think a lot of that goes back to George R. R. Martin obviously being involved. So he's going to be able to be, advising constantly on like the looks of stuff when they come to him with designs.
I don't think he can advise that much though, because he's going to be spending a lot of time writing, right?
Yes, that's...
So he's still got to finish a couple books, right?
Come on, George. It's been 11 years. I remember when I was watching when I first started to get into Game of Thrones, and I forget who, but someone had like this projection based on his writing technique, where they said we think somewhere between 2014 and 2018, The Winds of Winter will come out, somewhere in that timeline. And I remember thinking, my God, if I have to wait till 2016 for The Winds of Winter
let alone
to come
2018,
out,
yeah,
I'm like, I don't know what I'll do. And lo and behold, here we are,
Yeah.
11 years later. And
man.
look, he's writing some really big books. I get that, but obviously it would have made things a lot easier if A Dream of Spring had been completed before the show finished, let alone The Winds of Winter. But
yeah, but
Yeah.
what can you do?
yeah.
But with House of the Dragon, he's involved here and seems promising. They've got the budget for it. They've got the actors seem great. So there's some confidence I have of going into this with that a tepid, cautious, but also I'm looking forward to it in some regard. So we went over characters, we went over the cinematography of the plot of it. What do you think about the dialogue so far? Just we've only watched one episode, but just based on the hour that we saw, does it bring you back to that? Does it have that Game of Thrones dialogue? Were you wowed by anything, or was it as expected?
Well, Benioff and Weiss aren't writing anymore, so it's gonna sound different, and it sounded different. It sounded a little less monologue-y. I mean, there's a monologue at the end, but I feel like with the original series, you had a lot more extended sequences of dialogue, one-on-one kind of interactions. This one felt a little quicker. It felt like the scenes were moving a bit quicker, and it was less, I guess, less one-on-one, if that makes sense. I feel like that's a key difference. So the dialogue was, for me, different. From a book perspective, it wasn't anything that radically different. I think Benioff and Weiss, definitely, especially as the series progressed, brought their own style of writing to the show more than this. This didn't feel as distinct as that. This felt more sort of just general. But again, it's the first episode, so it's a lot of exposition. They're just trying to let the audience know, give them some key points to follow as the series progresses. So, from a writing perspective and from the dialogue, I was fine with it. Wasn't wowed. But it's a first episode. They're just trying to get people involved and bring them back into this world.
Yeah, and expectations wise for the fans, not just for us, but I was really actually surprised to see the huge, and like I said, we're recording this actually 3-ish hours after the episode premiered. So the initial reaction of the super fans who are watching this right away when it drops is really strong, which did surprise me just a bit. But I think it's a lot of people feeling, we left off with season 8 with that was really down. And so coming into this and seeing something that's not bad is really promising. But the reason I was really surprised by that general feel is I don't know why I expected more negativity, which is good for the fandom, because I expected the people come into this and really start bashing it, because I know I don't want to shout out your parents here, but we finished the episode and your parents, they had some thoughts about this.
They did. They were not fans.
They were not fans.
They were not fans of it.
Could you say something from outside our perspective is I'm high 6 about this, I'm feeling okay. You're a soft 8, so we're generally okay about this.
I'm gonna have a very angry phone call with my parents.
Let's make your parents angry, because we want to get a third opinion in here. What did they say they didn't like about the premiere, so that we can get in that perspective?
Yeah, they said there wasn't any humor. I don't know if the original series had that much humor.
Okay, that's
yeah. They thought it was humorless. They thought it was very graphic and very violent. Again, I think the original series kind of had that. They actually were not fans of the effects. Now
they didn't like the effects. Okay.
Yeah, they didn't like the effects. I thought they were fine, but
not to jump in, but they mentioned that there was violence for violence sake. It didn't have meaning behind the violence, which I could see that. I could kind of see that. But okay, the one I don't get is the humor part. Like it doesn't have to be funny, I don't think. But maybe they missed Tyrion, because Tyrion really pulled that in.
You're
together.
right. You
so
did. Yeah.
I think they're missing Tyrion a lot.
Yeah, you are missing a character like that. I mean, you're missing. It's tough, because I think the strong point of Game of Thrones was the characters. Yeah. There were so many great characters that you just fell in love with, and I mean, God, Jaime Lannister. I mean, certainly seasons 1 through 6 or 7. I mean, just amazing character arc. Obviously, is completely ruined in the last season, unfortunately. And we'll see. Maybe Daemon Targaryen has a kind of arc like that, because he's kind of a loose cannon like Jaime was initially. But yeah, I mean, that's the main thing I think you're looking for, is you want that character that you just fall in love with and you get these very strong emotions about, because in the original series you had 4 or 5 characters that really just kept you invested.
Yes.
And you don't have that so far. Again, it's just in episode 1. We'll see where they go with it. But yeah. Yeah,
so the House of the Dragon will live or die with its characters.
I agree.
If by episode 2, 3, we start to see I'm still not really rooting for you yet, I'm still not really invested, the show's not going to do super well. At least how we feel about it. So if it really does pull those in and gets you that Game of Thrones feel again, I can't wait. We will see.
I'm very excited.
Yeah. I mean, we will see. We're going to have another episode. This is a rather quick one, but we're going to have a reaction and review of the House of the Dragon after the finale, and we'll have our rating. We'll go into more specific details, but we can't really say much else other than covering the premiere of an episode, which was promising. Was not a letdown. I think that's the key. Yeah. I was not let down by it. I'm ready for more. Exactly. Now we're going to finish this off by listing everything great about season 8 of Game of Thrones, starting now.